The Prime Minister told other leaders at the Munich conference yesterday, none of whom has a vote in our elections, that they should beware the Greens and the Reform Party. Why was that necessary? What's it to do with them?
Well, the Prime Minister was making a speech broadly yesterday that would obviously be seen more widely. It was reported in the UK. It was also listened to in the hall in the Munich Security Conference by people from all over Europe and across the world. And I think there is a wider issue here that in the end, our national security depends on us having partnerships abroad, that those make us stronger at home. NATO, the NATO alliance is really important to that. And we have seen both Reform and the Greens undermine that commitment to the NATO alliance. I think that is hugely important because I think our national security...
What has Nigel Farage said or done that undermines NATO?
Which they are not doing so.
What has Nigel Farage said or done that undermines NATO?
We've seen Reform have not taken seriously the threat from Russia. They have refused and failed to do an investigation into Russian interference within their own party, despite the fact that their Welsh leader was convicted of the links, the real serious problems in terms of the links to Russia. They have not taken seriously. They have too often, I think, dismissed the aggression and the threat from Russia, even at a time when we've seen lethal poisons being used once again, just as we saw in Salisbury. So I do take that extremely seriously, and I think it is a problem that Reform don't.
What you've just heard is a passionate defense of Reform's position on NATO, the European Union, and Britain's national security. And it reflects a growing political argument that's becoming louder across the UK. At its core, this debate comes down to one simple question: what actually keeps Britain safe? Is it closer cooperation with Europe, as Labour argues? Or is it strengthening ties with the United States while maintaining independence from EU influence, as Reform and Nigel Farage suggest? The Speaker here strongly rejects the claim that Reform would undermine national security. In fact, they flip the argument completely. They say Reform's policies would strengthen Britain's security, not weaken it. And the first major point they make is about NATO. They argue that while NATO is important, the real backbone of NATO is the United States, and to a lesser extent, Britain itself. This is a crucial argument because it reframes the entire discussion. Instead of seeing NATO as a collective of equal partners, this perspective sees NATO as primarily dependent on American military power. And there's truth to the fact that the United States contributes the largest share of NATO's military capability. The US has the biggest defense budget in the world, the most advanced military technology, and the logistical power to project force globally. So from this viewpoint, maintaining a strong relationship with the United States becomes the top priority for national security. The Speaker then contrasts this with Labour's approach, accusing Keir Starmer and his government of trying to move Britain closer to the European Union, something they argue goes against the Democratic will expressed in the Brexit referendum. And this is where Brexit still casts a long shadow over British politics. For millions of voters, Brexit wasn't just about trade. It was about sovereignty, control, and independence. The idea that Britain should make its own decisions without being influenced by EU courts, EU legislation, or EU political structures. So when politicians talk about resetting relations with the EU, critics immediately question whether that means slowly undoing Brexit. The Speaker also makes a clear distinction between NATO and the EU, arguing that the EU is not a military alliance and therefore has little to do with Britain's direct security. And technically, that distinction is correct. NATO is a military alliance built around collective defense. The EU is primarily a political and economic union, although it has developed some defense coordination mechanisms. But politically, the perception matters just as much as the technical reality. If voters believe that closer EU alignment means less independence, they see it as a threat to sovereignty, regardless of whether it improves coordination. Another major part of the argument focuses on illegal migration. The Speaker claims that securing Britain's borders is central to national security. They argue that stopping illegal crossings would immediately improve safety, stability, and public confidence. This reflects a broader shift in political thinking, where border control is no longer seen as just an immigration issue, but as a national security issue. Because borders represent control, and control represents sovereignty. If people believe the government cannot control who enters the country, trust in the system begins to collapse. The Speaker also accuses Labour of hypocrisy, saying they are trying to portray reform as weak on security while allegedly pursuing policies that weaken Britain's independence. This is a classic political strategy used by all parties. Instead of just defending your own policies, you attack your opponent's credibility. Because if voters lose trust in your opponent, they are more likely to support you, even if they don't fully agree with every detail of your platform. Another key moment is when the Speaker dismisses accusations linking reform to past controversies involving individuals connected to Russia. They argue that these incidents are outdated and irrelevant to the current party structure. This reflects a broader frustration among supporters who feel their movement is being judged based on past associations rather than current policies. This is something that happens frequently in politics. Parties evolve, leadership changes, and internal structures shift. But opponents often continue to use past controversies to damage credibility. The Speaker also makes a wider argument about political motivation. They claim that falling approval ratings are pushing the government to attack rival parties more aggressively, using accusations and fear-based messaging to maintain support. Whether or not that's true, it reflects a deep distrust of political institutions that is becoming more common among voters. And this distrust is one of the most important political trends of the modern era. Because once voters stop trusting traditional parties, they begin looking for alternatives. That's how outsider movements gain momentum. They position themselves as challengers to an established system that voters feel has failed them. And that's exactly how reform presents itself, as an alternative to both Labour and the Conservatives. Not left-wing, not traditional conservative, but something different. Something focused on sovereignty, border control, and national independence. Now, whether someone agrees or disagrees with that vision depends entirely on their political beliefs. Some people believe Britain's future depends on cooperation, alliances, and international partnerships, including closer EU coordination. Others believe Britain's future depends on independence, strong borders, and prioritizing relationships with powerful allies like the United States. These two visions are fundamentally different. One emphasizes integration. The other emphasizes sovereignty. One emphasizes multilateral cooperation. The other emphasizes national control. And that's why debates like this are so intense. Because they aren't just about policies. They are about identity. They are about the direction of the country. They are about whether Britain should look outward towards shared international systems or inward towards stronger national independence. And until voters make a clear choice between those two paths, debates like this will continue, passionate, emotional, and deeply divided. Because at the heart of it, this isn't just a debate about NATO, the EU, or security. It's a debate about what Britain wants to be in the future.